people
uh,
about it.
we stopped listening to you when you were telling us about the first loan you took around, I think, 87 or 88. So possibly you could backtrack a bit and bring it back to speed.
Excellent. The first loan was more or less an informal loan from a family friend in 87 when I was in my senior 6 VAC. Then the first formal borrowing was in 1996 when I borrowed money from a commercial bank. That was 8 million. I was buying a house at 25 million, and I went to a commercial bank and borrowed 8 million. And since that time, I have not looked back. I've been borrowing from this commercial bank. And at some point, I had borrowed up to the tune of 1.2 billion in form of an overdraft. So one, I want to first make it clear that borrowing is not a crime. It's not a sin. Like some Christians say, borrowing is a sin. If you want to actually understand that borrowing is not a sin, and even God encourages it. You remember the parable of the talents, where 3 people were left with 1 talent, 2 talents, and 5 talents. The one who had 1 talent kept up with the talent, so I kept it as is. When he returned, he said, at least you'd have put it into a commercial bank so that it earns some interest, and I don't find it as it was. That implies that actually God expects you to not to store money in mattresses, but to store money in commercial banks so that it can attract some interest. And that interest, commercial banks get it because they lend out money. So religiously, God encourages borrowing. And 2, you cannot grow at a rate that you would want to grow if you don't borrow. Because many people, of course, are ambitious. They want to move a little faster than their resources can manage. And you can only do that if you borrow to boost your financial base. So right from the word, go on to say that borrowing is not a crime. Borrowing is encouraged, is even biblically, so it is good to borrow. However, I want to also specifically state that debt is not the answer. Debt is not always an answer because you can borrow and then it leads you into bad debt. So when you are borrowing, there are some few things you have to take into caution. I know the Bible says money is the answer for everything. If you read Ecclesiastes chapter 10, verse 19, since you introduced me as a canon, I use the Bible once in a while to expound on my point. In Ecclesiastes chapter 10, verse 19, it says that money is the answer for everything. But it has never said in the Bible anywhere that debt is the answer for everything. So right from the word go, not everybody must borrow, but everybody needs money. If you can have money without borrowing, well and good. But if you have to borrow, perfect. Borrow as long as you take precaution of what we're going to discuss. So, number 1, you can only move fast if you are alone. But if you want to go far, you move with others. So I want to borrow from that and say, you can move fast if you don't have a loan. But if you want to go far, then you need probably to borrow. Because when you borrow, you expand, then you increase the number of employees, you increase the size of business. You can also introduce some governance, you have a board. Then you move far. Even the succession will be guaranteed because it's a serious business where it does not depend only on you. And you can go far with a loan, but without a loan, maybe probably if you die, the business dies with you. The second thing I'd probably talk about is you need to do strategic planning. You need to lay down strategies. You need to have financial management. You need to have some governance structures at your level, whatever size you are, so that you actually establish whether you need a loan in your business or whether you need a loan as a person or you don't. The dangers that we run into sometimes is some of us do early or unplanned borrowings. You know, you are born with a father like Frank who is always depending on loans. And he tells you that, you know, unless you have a loan, you can never go far. Then you go and run to get a loan because Frank has been getting loans without knowing those basics. And the basics are you only get the loan when you need it, when you have a reason, and when you can pay it back. Those are the basics. You don't just borrow because so and so has been borrowing. And I've seen people make mistakes of unplanned borrowing, adding introduction into borrowing. Because you hear debts are good, you go and borrow, and by the time you notice, it has even consumed what you had for borrowing. I give an example. By the way, I have written books. One is Money Mistakes to Avoid, and the other one is Deadly Business Mistakes. And I discuss most of what I'm discussing in those books. I give an example in Money Mistakes to Avoid of Dr. Kanyerezi, who is the owner of Kampala Hospital. Dr. Kanyerezi conceived the idea in 2000 when he was 66 years old. But this idea could not take off until 2007. Reason being, he didn't have money, so he had to look for friends. They combined, they couldn't raise enough money, they had to get a loan. Now, Kampala Hospital is one of the best hospitals in this world. And it was the first hospital to get an MRI machine, to do a CT scan. So this was really a result of getting, first of all, friendly loans from friends who were the shareholders that took up about 6 or 7. And then, of course, they also later on put in a loan. It is now facility that you would envy because they took on loans. So now the first thing we observe from Kampala Hospital and Dr. Kanyerezi, one, understand the field you are in. Dr. Kanyerezi is a medical doctor. He knows a lot about that field. You cannot lie to him. Sometimes you borrow and put the money in fields we are not conversant with. Here you are a teacher, a secondary school teacher, a primary school teacher. You started the hospital. You borrow to buy a CT scan, which costs about 200 million. Then somebody tells you it is 400 million. Every time they tell it has a problem and you have to keep on servicing it, even when what they are telling you is not necessarily right. So you understand the field you are in. Are you borrowing for the field you understand? Is it right to borrow? Are you borrowing for the right thing? 2, let's avoid unnecessary borrowing. Sometimes you borrow because it is fashionable. So I mean, I've told you, Dr. Kanyerezi, there are so many businesses which have borrowed. The Victoria's school, or the Victoria's primary schools have borrowed, and they started borrowing from actually YCF, and they have grown this big. So when you have a few examples and you run and borrow, then you may not be borrowing because you want, but because you probably are just borrowing because others have done it. And some of those people who do that, you get money, you make fresh weddings, you enjoy it, you go to areas of enjoyment, and then eventually you find that you have a loan that you actually cannot pay back. The other challenge that you can address in avoiding a bad debt is loan diversion. Very common, quite common. You go to a bank and you tell them you want to expand your business, you want to build a house, a commercial house, you borrow, then after that, immediately they divert the loan because you had another urgent need, which the bank could not finance. Now you take the money in that other urgent need of yours, whether it is marrying a second wife, whatever the need is, or maybe your first son is wedding and you want to make that fresh wedding. Now, when you divert the loan, one, banks work like doctors. You need to, when you go to a doctor, you say, where is the pain? The pain is in the ankle. The pain is in the stomach. The pain is in the head. If the pain is in the head and you tell them it is the ankle, then the guy will not treat you because he doesn't actually address the pain. So when you go to a banker and you say, I want money to build a commercial house, and you take money and take it to the village and build a residential house because you want to make a point, I've reached. That residential house is not going to pay back the loan. That is loan diversion, and you are creating a ground for a bad loan, for a bad debt. So avoid loan diversion. And of course, the bank, the lender will have assessed the business you told him to do, or the project you are going to do. And they'll give you the money based on that project. So if the money is used elsewhere, then you cannot blame them for having not successfully supported you. Then the other thing that I should warn you about to avoid bad debts that you cannot manage is expensive borrowing. Sometimes we go and just borrow. We don't mind about the interest rate. And these days, for instance, we are in the days of inflation. Days of inflation, you must know which bank charges what. Some banks, they say the interest rate is 20%, but 20% per what? Is it per month? Is it per year? I have my experience. I have been in this thing for quite some time. I've borrowed money. I have so I know either side. 10 to 24%. You do not ask how much. This normally commercial banks lend at 20%, 24% per annum. But when you go to a money lender, he will tell you 10%, 15%, 5%. Then you say, wow, this lender is very cheap. The other guys are telling me 24%. This one is at 10%. I have personally seen even an engineer tell me that, these lenders are very good. They lend at 10%, but the bank was cheating me at 24%. So 10% from a lender is very expensive borrowing. And if you borrow that kind of money, you are talking about over 120% per year because they normally compound it. So that money, it is difficult to have business in Uganda that can pay back that money. And in the books I told you, money mistakes to avoid specifically, I mentioned circumstances where you can borrow money from a money lender. Yes, they are there. I mean, for instance, your son has been imprisoned and he has to be released, and you are convinced about intervening. You can go and borrow. Or you are buying a plot next to yours. You have a serious structure. Your neighbor is selling the plot, and you don't want anybody else to buy it, and you are very sure that you can pay back the money. Actually, in all cases of those emergency borrowings, I emphasize that you must be very sure that you actually pay back the money. You shouldn't let that land go. Buy it and expand. But when you borrow from a money lender, when you borrow 10% per month, then go and actually pay back that loan and acquire a cheaper loan. If you are not paying it back in a short time, all of it, acquire a cheaper loan. So expensive borrowing can land you into bad loans. I have seen many people land into bad loans because of expensive borrowing, especially from money lenders or from these sources which are expensive. Now, connected to that is the wrong source of funds. Sometimes you acquire money from a wrong source of funds. You can find that you are borrowing, and you are borrowing from either a money lender, or some people actually are not even money lenders, but they have money. They can lend money, but they don't want to call themselves money lenders because they saw some people call them loan sharks. So they say, for me, I'm there, I'm Frank Katusiime, but I can give you 100 million as long as you give me 10% per month, and that is 10 millions. You can imagine when you take 100 million and I think 10 millions every month, it means within 10 months, if you are very religious, 10 months you have paid back the principal, and the guy is just eating on the profits. Now, I hope people are together. See somebody calling. I hope it's not part of you. Ronald, are we together?
Yes, we are together. We are following.
Excellent. So a wrong source of borrowing is where you go to somebody, Frank Katusiime says, I can give you 100 million, and the only thing I want is sign this agreement that you have sold me your residential house. That's the wrong source. I am borrowing money. Why should I sign that I have sold my house? So, and two, by the way, what is my protection? I have signed that I've sold my house for 400 million and I've only borrowed 100 million. Tomorrow, if I default, this guy takes the 400 million. Now, where is my source of protection? But I had not taken it over because this guy is my cousin. I wanted him first to relocate, and he has failed to relocate, so I want him to go off. So wrong source of borrowing can cause bad debts. The other related to that is the risking high value assets. Quite related to that. You are going to borrow 100 million, and you are taking your asset, your only house probably, or one of your houses, which is valued at 500 million. Now, does that make sense? Even in the Lord's Prayer, they said, don't lead us into temptation. You only want 100 million, and you are giving me a house of 500 million. You are leading me into temptation. I have your 500 million. I know I can, even when you are trying to pay the 100, I can hide away from you. I know people have done that, very big people. If I shared your experiences, and I have a lot of them, it is just on the D-Day, the guy brings 100 million. I have his property of 500 million. I hide away. He cannot see me. Then tomorrow I start, the process of taking the asset. So why do you put an asset of 500 million when all you need is 100 million? My advice is, if you are borrowing 100 million, really even 200 is big, put an asset of 150 million. Okay, fine. But why do you put a very expensive asset when what you want is small? You are tempting the person giving you the money. If he does not have the heart that you have, assuming you have that kind of heart, you are tempting him to actually think of taking your asset by force, because he will take a very free thing without toiling for it. So avoid that, because it can lead you into a bad debt. The other thing I want you to to observe is losing track of your own obligations. I share an experience in one of my books that I've just told you about. You have borrowed from many sources, and for your own information, I have borrowed from more than one source. I will not say how many, but if any of you was talked to me individually and was consulting me on that, on a case by case, I can share. But right now, what I want you to know is that I borrowed from more than one source. But one thing I do is I always take stock of my obligations. I know when my interest is due. I know when the principal is due. I know how much is due. That's very important. Because if I have lent you money and you don't know when it is due, to me as a lender, it is a sign that you are likely not to pay me. Because you are not following up the loan. You are not taking track of the loan. You don't mind about the loan. And I share the experience of somebody who had actually borrowed money from some source. And I think he had borrowed something like 78 million or something close to that. Then all of a sudden, when they demanded money, he wanted to pay something that was going to be much less, and this was after several months or several years. And he was saying that, okay, let's settle at this amount, simply because he did not know how much the loan was now worth. So that, of course, shows that in the first instance, you are not a person who plans to pay his debt. You just borrow and you want to eat people's money. So if you want to avoid bad debt, always take stock of your debt obligation. My recommendation is that don't borrow from multiple sources. That's my recommendation. But even when you decide to do, because sometimes circumstances force you to, always keep stock of your obligations. You know that Ronald, I owe Ronald so much, I owe Frank so much, I owe James so much, and it is due on this date. And so that you keep on paying the interest when it is due, and eventually paying back the principal when you want to pay off your own. The other point now I want to talk about is not honoring your own obligations. Quite close related. Whenever your own falls due, honor, pay it back. If the interest is due, pay back the interest. Because the moment you don't pay back, you attract the person to start asking questions. Is this guy going to pay me? Or he's going to default? There are people who refuse to pay on the pretext that the lender is richer than them. I have seen it, especially these small businesses. You go and borrow from Madvani, you go and borrow from Sudan and say, this guy has a lot of money, just given him 20 million. This one he can forget. That is very bad. When you borrow money, make sure you pay back. Because the moment you default from Madvani, people get to know. I write in my books that, integrity is like virginity. You lose virginity once. Integrity, you lose it once. The only bad thing with integrity is that when you lose it, everybody gets to know. You actually get to know rust. Because you'll be going to people, I want this, nobody is responding. Why? Because they know that you actually lost integrity. And for you don't know that they have all known. And you'll find that nobody is giving you anything because they know you. Related to that, the other point I want to share is pay your loans in time. If you have decided it is tomorrow, do it tomorrow. Somebody will take money for 1 month, promising to pay in a month's time, and it'll take a year or two. That is losing integrity. If you go back to that same source, you will never get back the money if the guy is actually sharp. Because if you are going to borrow money, be sure of the source. I have rental income, I have a salary, I have something. Avoid sources of that Ronald Mukasa owes me so much, he's going to pay me. No, that one you are not sure until he has paid it. But if you work with Enterprise Uganda and they pay you a salary of so much, and you've been there for so long, and you know how the Enterprise Uganda is doing, then you can very easily rely on the salary, but not on a loan from a friend. If you have fixed your money in the bank and they have been paying you an interest on fixed deposits for so much, then you can rely on that. If you have tenants, more than 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, and on average, you can say maybe out of 6, 3 will pay by this date, of course, from experience. But don't rely on the money that you have not received. Then you can borrow and say, I'll pay from this source. So the point is, make sure that you pay your loans in time so that you can keep your integrity, you can keep trusted. Then I talked about multiple borrowing, and this point is quite slightly different but similar, and justifiably engaging in multiple borrowing. I have seen people who borrow from multiple sources without a big reason. And it is very tempting now in Uganda because there are so many lenders. You can go to a commercial bank, you can go to a development bank, you can go to a SACCO, you can go to a VSLA, Village Savings and Loan Association, you can go to a friend and get an interest-free loan. Or these days, by the way, they are not necessarily interest-free. There is this very, very major ruling recently, I think this week, of this judge in Guru who said that, actually friendly loans can attract interest. It is a very major ruling in this area, which I'm sure you all know, you should take note of. A friendly loan can attract interest. The judge said, and he was right, because unless you know how the financial system works, how should you expect me to give you an interest-free loan? Where do you think I stole it from? I have shared that I borrow money from banks, I borrow money from other institutions. How do you now expect me to give you interest-free loans? So I think if I was a lawyer, I'd have made a similar ruling. So you can actually, and it is on the commercial banks and I think a few other institutions that go to the Credit Reference Bureau. If you go to Stanbic Bank and you want to borrow stuff from Centenary, they can always check your indebtedness of the other commercial banks. But the SACCOs are not yet there. The VSLAs are not yet there. The people, the friends are not yet there. So you can actually borrow from all these sources without them knowing that you have all these many loans. One time I'll share an example. One lender had lent money to a person, and this guy had defaulted. And the guy said, I'm going to sue you. He handed him over to the lawyer and said, I want you to get this money for me. I think it was a little money, like 5-6 million. So when the lawyer wrote to him, the guy responded using his lawyer and said, I am very aware I owe this man money. It is so much, but I want to kindly let you know that I owe money 32 different institutions and people. And he listed them. So I am trying to pay back this money, but kindly give me some time so that I can organize myself and pay these people slowly. So just imagine you have gone to demand for money. The person is indebted to 32 different individuals or companies. Do you think that one can pay? And of course, that is unjustifiably engaging in multiple borrowing. And similar to that, I think there's an example which I share in my book. There is a young man who had finished university and he was working in a bank, which I had not mentioned. And he borrowed up to the tune of 60 million many years back, I think about 10, 15 or 20 years back. And when he could not pay, they went to the parents and they found out that this guy would borrow money, get girlfriends, go to Nairobi, of course, eat it and then come back. Nairobi for a weekend with a girlfriend. Next weekend is a different one. 60 million. He owed 60 million to different lenders. So sometimes people just create these bad debts themselves. The other point that I want to bring forward is the ignorance of the total cost of borrowing. I hinted on it a little earlier, but many times when we borrow, we don't know the total cost of borrowing. If Stanbic says it's charging 20%, Central says they are charging 22%, then housing finances are charging 19%. Which one is cheaper? It may not necessarily be the one of 19%, simply because there are other costs that are involved. You should always try to establish the fees and costs associated with the facility before you borrow. In Uganda, by the way, research shows that such fees and costs, which are outside the interest rate, range from 3% to 9% on any given loan. So somebody tells you 19%, but you add the other fees, it becomes 23%, which is now worse than the other 20%, whose fees is maybe 1%. So what are the other costs of borrowing? That's why people ask for amortization. If I borrow so much, how will I pay, when, and what are the other costs? So know the total cost of borrowing. The other point, I'm almost coming to conclusion because I'm conscious of time. The other point I want to share with you is that being a cosigner or a guarantor in joint commitments, avoid. I want to borrow money as Frank Katusiime. I called you, Ronald, come and sign for me. Of course, I've known Ronald for some time, and I'm sure he has a lot of rating on me. And then he comes and starts saying, I know Frank. You know, Frank is okay. I have not heard anything bad about him. You signed, okay, you signed for me. I am guaranteeing you to get 500 million. And of course, everybody knows Ronald Mukasa is been trading in these things. He knows these things. When the render says Mukasa has guaranteed, they give Frank the money. Tomorrow, when Frank defaults, say, well, Mukasa, you'll be equally responsible. So the moment you want to co-sign, you want to guarantee, be careful. You can find that you are running into a bad debt, which is not necessarily yours, which was created because you are a bit careless or you are a bit generous. If I am to be positive, you are very generous. You want Frank to do his business, and you don't want to show him that you are not that close to him. Then you guarantee. So before you guarantee, make sure that you are sure of what you are doing. The other point, as I come to close, is embracing conflict of interest in transactions. Conflict of interest. I'll give a simple example. One time, one of my relatives borrowed 6 million from a bank. 2 years later, after several reminders, he had breached the contract, and there was a roundtable discussion. And one of the key things I remember is that she told me that she had actually chosen to borrow from this person because he was a relative. He had borrowed from a person, he had borrowed from a bank. Of course, the banks, they had gotten saturated. So this particular loan of 6 million, they had borrowed from his cousin. I said, when they were demanding money from this lady, she said, for me, I actually had borrowed this money from you because I knew you are my cousin. If anything happened, you would understand. Now, that is conflict of interest. When you are lending money, if you are lending to a relative, it is clearly a conflict of interest. In formal institutions, they talk about conflict of interest, and you understand it, and you avoid it. But when you come to your business, to your smaller business, to your private businesses, then you think that it doesn't apply. It does apply. When you lend money to your wife, and you are a business, you know that this is your wife. The reason why she's coming to is that she knows that when the worst comes, the worst, you will understand. You cannot take your wife to prison. So if you have 4 wives and you have lent money to all the 4 wives, that is one way of creating reasons for a bad debt. First of all, on the sides of the wives, and of course, you as a business, I'm sure when you are lending money to the wives, you're also borrowing from somewhere. So they have not paid you, you are also not paying those other people. So you find you have a bad debt permanently, and eventually your business will close. And maybe of course, I talked about the wrong reasons for borrowing. You borrow for the right reasons. And I at the very beginning, I told you that one of the key mistakes you can do is to decide never to borrow. Borrowing is good, but you don't just borrow. Now, the other thing I could talk about, which you may not see as very important, but I think it is not utilizing banking facilities. Whenever you get a small coin, put it into a bank, because you are creating a record. You are creating a financial record, and the financial record will show the financial capacity, and the financial capacity will actually show you show a person that is likely to give you money that you are able. And the financial capacity will also tell the bank or the lender that this is your size. This is the size that you can afford. And when they're giving you money, they know, yeah, Frank can afford this because this is his banking, this is his draws. It means the bankings are from income. And because if the spend remains like this, he's likely to be able to get 20 million in a month because he has been getting it, banking it. If I am banking 20 million in a month on my account, and that's all the account I have when I'm going to borrow money, why should I borrow money and I convince somebody that I'm going to be able to pay him 40 million in a month? People come and say, I get this other income which does not come through the banking system. I mean, if it is income, why doesn't it go through the banking system? Maybe he's lying. He has never gotten any income. And of course, again, if you are borrowing and you are basing on something that you are not able to defend, you create a bad debt. You can convincingly tell him, me, I have cattle in Chirhura right now. I'm in Chirhura. I have cattle in Chirhura. I have a square mile. These people sell milk. Sometimes I sell cows, but I just consume of hand without taking it through the banking system. If it has not gone through the banking system and I give you money, I'm creating a reason for you for a bad debt because it is not something I can prove that you've been getting. And of course, mismanaging credit and collections, because when you borrow, make sure that your business keeps on getting the income it does. If you sell your items on credit, make sure they are paid. If there is money due for collection, make sure it is collected. Because sometimes you can convince a lender, give me 500 million because I actually earn it. Because if I say 500 million in a year, it means maybe I get 40 million per whatever. Now, however that 40 million comes in, but simply because you correct goods you sell on credit, and you make sure that everything that is due to you comes to you. Now, if you don't do that, then you will actually have the capacity to pay, but because you are not following up with your clients who owe you money, then you finally find you cannot pay. And that will mean that you have incurred a bad debt. So make sure that your systems for collecting loans, collecting money from clients work and follow them up. And finally, time value of money. Time value of money is very important. And the time value of money should be taken into account, because when you are invoicing or signing a service contract, especially if payment is to be made in installments. What I mean, a shilling received today is worth more than that received tomorrow. A shilling received today is heavier than the shilling received tomorrow. And with the days of inflation, you can understand. So a deposit should be solicited for on signing a contract. Ask for a deposit. A payment schedule should be made or should be agreed upon, and it should incorporate late payment charges. If I'm paying you after 6 months, after 1 year, after 2 years, then I should have those late payment charges because I am using your money. I've taken the goods, I'm using your money. You should have some knowledge of the net present value, internal rate of return, the payback period, which are handy when you are making investments. And of course, such are technically, I'm sure Ronald, at some point you talk to these people about those things because I know you understand them very well. You discount, you see, the money that you receive, because if you say, yes, they owe me money, I know they repay me. They have taken 4 years, but eventually they repay me. Yes, if I've taken 4 years, I eventually pay you. But what would be that value of money I pay you after 4 years? If I had taken 5 million from you, I pay you after 4 years, will it be still worth 5 million? Certainly not, because we have had inflation, say on average 5%. And of course, this money, if it had kept with you, you'd have used it in business and to have made more money. So the 5 million 4 years back, if it had been used in business, it would have probably become 10 or 15 million now. And at the very minimum, like the power of the tyrants, of the tyrants I mentioned that earlier, if he has taken 5 million 4 years back or 10 years back and is getting it back, let him pay back with those charges. Otherwise, you'll find you are incurring a lot of debt that you are giving goods. By the way, goods you sell on credit, it is really like a debt to your clients. And and for you have borrowed from a bank is charging you every month, and they cannot stop the charges. Even in COVID, some banks didn't stop any charge, and your clients are not paying anything in whatever they take. Even if they pay after 5 years, they just smile and say thank you. So you are creating a ground for bad debt. Ladies and gentlemen, I could share more, but if you want, you can read these books, because essentially most of the sharing is from there. And I think what I could probably have forgotten is debt repudiation. Debt repudiation is where you have borrowed. I think I hinted in it rightly. You have borrowed money and it is due. You are not yet able to pay in your business. From your business proceeds, you can go and borrow money to pay a debt. Of course, that is a kind of plan B, but you keep your integrity. You have borrowed money from Stanbic Bank, it is due, you cannot pay it back. Go to Centenary and borrow money and pay Stanbic. So that in Stanbic, you keep the rating, and in Centenary, I'm assuming you have an account there and they can also give you money. Or go to Sako and borrow money from there and pay this, so that the bank keeps rating you higher in terms of financial discipline. And even the other person you borrowed from, he also, of course, when it's also due and you are not able to pay, go back now to number one, Stanbic, and pay Centenary. At the end of the day, of course, eventually these are now stopgap measures, because at the end of the day, you have to pay back all these loans. But at least in the meantime, as a stopgap measure, maybe you have a bond, a treasury bond that is not yet matured, and you are waiting for it. So these stopgap measures, when the bond matures, you clear all the debts and you become a free man. So in conclusion, what is important is borrow what you can pay back. Be sure of your sources of repayment. Be sure that what you are borrowing for is justifiable. It is a business, it is a project, it is a venture that is going to produce money for you, that is going to create wealth for you, that is going to add value for you. Don't just borrow because other people have been borrowing. Don't just borrow because it is fashionable. Ladies and gentlemen, I think I don't want to add on further. Since we still have a few minutes, I'll leave the time for you, because I know there is leveling of expectations. I didn't ask you because of time, but now whatever expectation I didn't cover, kindly raise it in the QA if there is time, Leonard, and then I can address it. If I can't, I'm sure I can see 104 participants, others can address it. Thank you very much.
Super. Thanks a lot, Canon Frank, for those submissions. A number of nuggets you have shared, which are powerful. Some of them reminders, some of them new to some of us, some of them things you have always known, and they have just come alive right now. As Canon Frank has mentioned, he's the author of 2 books on this subject. Money mistakes to avoid and deadly business mistakes. Those are 2 different books. Mr. Frank, you share with us where we can be able to find them. But ideally, as he has mentioned, a number of the ideas he has shared are embedded in those 2 books. Listening, I thought there are a number of things which kind of stood out for me. You talked about what the loss of integrity means. I'd never looked at it that way, equating it to a loss of virginity. You talked about losing track of your obligations. At times, you find that so you lent money to someone, but when you think about it, actually, they have forgotten that you lent them money. And I think especially with the resources we borrow from family members, your father lends you 300,000, 1 million shillings, and you catch yourself forgetting that actually you borrowed his money. And at times you get a bit of amnesia and you are saying possibly he gave me the money, I didn't borrow it. So that was a powerful revelation. You talked about the fact that you need to build a track record with your financer and using the banking services as a tool, or your SACCO services, or whichever financer you have, using their services beyond the borrowing creates that track record. I like the bit about the conflict of interest, especially when you're borrowing from family and friends. I think I never looked at it that way, that sometimes when you lend someone, you are really in a trap, and whatever happens, you can't catch yourself taking your brother, your sister, your spouse to for measures to be able to get that money. And I think that's such a powerful revelation. We have a couple of minutes for questions, just about 30 minutes. Friends, if you have a question you want to ask at this moment, put up your hand and share that question, or you can put it in the chat box and we capture that question. Martin asked, how can we be able to get the books? I think Mr. Frank will share on that. If you have a question, just put it in the chat box, and then we can be able to proceed. I think, Frank, there are a couple of questions which I wanted to start with as we wait from the rest from the audience. And I think my question is, if I catch myself already stuck in debt, I mean, I made some bad decisions, and currently I've borrowed from multiple sources, and I feel like I can't be able to repay. People are looking for me. I'm switching off my phone. How should I react when I'm in such a situation? When I catch myself caught and swallowed by bad debt, how should I be able to react? And then I also wanted you to comment on when I borrow from a place, and for me, what comes to me is sometimes there are government programs where you can be able to borrow from government. The most recent is the parish development model. How should a borrower perceive such debts? We have had a lot of conversations where people are saying, you know what, this money, I'll take it and I won't pay, from the onset that they're not planning to pay. What are those tenets of a good borrower, especially when you have concessional loans which have been given to you? How should you behave with those concessional loans? Sometimes there are loans which are given which even don't have interest on them. You just have to return the principal. How should that be dealt with? I think we could take a couple of more questions. Let me just check in the chat box for the pieces which we have there, and then we'll proceed answering those questions. Frank, you can take those, and then we can be able to take a look at the next.
Thank you very much, Ronald, for the very interesting issues raised. The first one, very, very, very important. If you're already in debt, how do you react? I know this is, some people find themselves in debt. Actually, when I was preparing, I thought about it, but I think I forgot to mention something close to this. Because I know some people have borrowed here and there, they find themselves in debts and they cannot easily move out. How do you move out? Number one, especially when you have borrowed in multiple, whether it is multiple or you have borrowed from one source, the first and very important thing, don't hide. Don't hide. Keep your presence with your lenders. Keep your presence with your lenders. Make sure you don't hide from them. Because hiding means you are not willing to pay. 1, 2, hiding means you are not just unwilling, not just planning to default, but probably also you are not able. And this attracts the lenders to start hunting for you. And when they start hunting for you, you can very easily actually get other issues. Stress. I should have mentioned that there are three key sources of stress. The first one is workplace. The second one is marital press, marriage or domestic. And the third one is financial. Now, workplace, of course, if you have issues with your boss, every day, that's why the person you are with, you can get stress, you can get pressure, you can get heart issues. Eventually, you can actually get cancer and you can die. If you have issues with domestic, you are with your spouse every night with your children, you have issues with them, you can get similar things. If you have issues with finances, and issues with finances mainly mean that you have debts, you can get those three. You can get stress, you can get pressure, you can get heart attack eventually, cardiac arrest. You can even get cancer. You know, coronary cancer is mainly caused by stress. So the moment you begin hiding from the lenders, it means you are creating unnecessary stress in you. Because as you are hiding, you are getting stressful. I have an example of a lady who was a very rich lady. She lost her husband. The husband left her with a lot of things, businesses, and then she started borrowing to keep them sustainable. Eventually, they could not actually become sustainable. She incurred a lot of debts. She could not pay back. She started hiding. So one of the lenders eventually caught up with her, and he took her to Rizira. When the lender was in Rizira, of course, when you take a lender, a borrower from to Rizira, then you have to incur some costs of upkeep and blah, blah, blah. So when this man went to check on the lender and see how she's faring, when are you planning to pay now that you are in prison, do you know what the lender said? The lender thanked the man, thank you so much for what you did for me, bringing me here. Do you know how much stress I was going through every day, hiding from everybody? Now here in Rizira, I don't hide from anybody. I am feeling very comfortable, very peaceful. This was a formerly very rich lady. Actually, when the husband died, she had fixed 2 billion on the bank account, in the commercial bank account. That is one of the assets. Several buildings around Kampala. She said, you have really saved me from a rot. So when I talk about stress and such associated sicknesses because of a debt, it is very, very, very real. So how do you handle? First of all, if there are multiple debts, as I said, don't hide too. Start paying the small ones. Here you have borrowed 500 million, here it is 100 million, here it is 50, here it is 2 million. Clear that one of 2 million. And when you clear, strengthen the relationship with the person of 2 million. When this person of 2 million meets the one of 100 million, say, this guy will pay, this guy will pay you. No, the guy informed actually is going to pay you. Clear that one of 500,000. Clear these ones of, because some people borrow from 500, sometimes you borrow for a ranch of 200,000. Clear that one immediately. So one, it is easy to get smaller monies and clear smaller loans. Two, people have given you the smaller loans. They actually the ones who are going to spread the gospel. The guy who reformed, the guy who changed, his finances are now doing fine, he's going to pay you. So that even the big lenders will start being hopeful. Okay, no, he has not, but he's going to pay us. So if you clear one by one, eventually you clear all. Two, look at, and very, very important, look at the causes. How did you get there? Because you see, when you are in a hole, the advice normally is don't dig further. When you find yourself in a hole, the first medicine is don't dig further. Because you are in a hole of financial indebtedness. The first thing you should do, because if you are in a hole and you dig, then you are creating another hole. The first thing you do is don't borrow again. Because borrowing again means getting another bad day. Stop borrowing. But as you stop borrowing, ask yourself, how did you get there? What was the money for? If the money was to finance relatives, can't you have relatives whom you are not financing? Already that shows that you are financing relatives whom you cannot finance, you are not able to finance, but you are forcing yourself to do something you could not afford. So stop that area. So you cross all those gaps, all those expenditure areas that you are doing unnecessarily. Then you don't borrow again. Then you start paying the smaller loans, and then look at the interest rates charged by each loan if they are multiple. You can also choose to start paying the loans with high interest. If you have borrowed a loan from a lender at 10% per month, that is very crucial. Start paying off that instead of starting with the one of 24% per year from the commercial bank. Because the one of per month, you are going to incur much more loan, much more money, much more debt if you don't pay it now. Then two, and very, very important, they negotiate. There is one person whom everybody in the audience knows. He came to me one time and said he had a very big loan. I think there were 3 loans. What does he do? He explained how he got the money, how he did it. Then I said, why do he wanted actually me to lend him money to go and pay? I said that is not a solution. That's what I told you. If you're in the hole, don't dig deeper. You have loans. You want another loan to pay the loans. I said, why don't you go and meet these people? First of all, I said, don't hide. Go and meet these people. Explain to them your challenges and request for some favor, e.g. a waiver, e.g. some, write-off of some kind. You understand, I've been paying well, but, for this particular day, for this particular loan, I have an issue. Why don't you really waive of some bit of it? This guy went there, used the strategy, and this money was waived. It was reduced, and the guy paid the debts and finished. When he wrote a book, he's also an author. He even mentions me there as a person who was part of the solution. So negotiate with people. These are people, even the banks. You can negotiate with banks. I know commercial banks can negotiate, but when you hide, you will not have those. So that is how I think. Briefly, those are the things you can. Of course, I talked about debt repudiation. You can, for instance, if you have 3 money lenders, you have 2 commercial banks. You borrow from one commercial bank and pay off the money lenders. You are paying loans of 10% per month, with replacing them with a loan of 24% per annum. That means you are actually saving your interest expense, which is very good. So those are some of the things you can do. And of course, the other things can depend on the different types of things you are doing in the business. Make sure you check your business, your internal controls. Sometimes you think you have borrowed this money, but it's actually not you who borrowed, it's your accountant who got the money and ate it, but you are now paying. So check your internal controls. Did this money actually come in? Or sometimes the accountant made a fictitious entry that you actually borrowed when there was no borrowing, and you are now paying back the money that you didn't actually borrow. So those are now the details that I can give you on one-on-one. Then the other question was the PDM. Yes, very important. I know there are some people who say, PDM, this is government money, government is thanking us for voting for them, and they don't want to pay back. One, as I said, integrity is lost once. Whether it is PDM money, actually that is even worse. PDM money, you get it from your local area, your area of residence. You eat and you go away. Everybody gets to know that Frank got money from PDM, ate it, didn't pay back. Now, in that local area of residence, everybody knows that Frank is not a trustworthy person. He has no integrity. He eats money for free. So even when you go to a commercial bank, a circle, and you ate PDM money, nobody is going to trust you. So whenever you borrow PDM, actually you should thank God that PDM money doesn't attract interest. If it doesn't, and you should pay it back because it doesn't attract interest. But never borrow any money from anywhere, even if it is your father. Pay it back because you are actually creating a track record. You are strengthening your profile. And the biggest asset that anybody has, I write it in my books, the biggest asset that anybody has is a name. If I lose my name as Frank, then I'm gone. Because 70% of your success is from the network that you have. If you have a network of 9 fools and you are one of them and you are the 10th, don't ask what you are. You are a fool. Because how did you land there? So the network is important. The name is important. You can lose the name in PDM. And remember, when financiers are lending money, they consider the 5 C's. And as long as your credibility is doubted, it will be difficult to get any money. And finally, I hope I have answered you, Ronald. Finally, you talked about my books. My books, you can get my books from Aristoc Bookshop and the Uganda Bookshop, and you can also get them directed from us. I think my number was on the flyer. I don't remember, but in case it wasn't, it is 0772 403 916, and same number on 0701. You can get it direct from our office. I have boys who can deliver, or you can get it from Uganda Bookshop or Aristoc. And if you are buying more books, like you have an institution, you can negotiate a discount. Each book is 40,000. Thank you very much, Ronald. I hope I have addressed your issues.
Wow, thank you so much. I think we have time for just one more round of questions. We have had a couple in the chat box. One of the questions comes from Sharon. Sharon says, thank you for the opportunity. Kindly, how do you build security for loans while paying back an existing loan, especially for a small business? How can a small business expand so that it builds more security, so that it can be able to get a bigger loan, but as it's paying the one which it's currently servicing? Then Beatrice asks, says, thank you, Mr. Frank, for a great day. Now, how can you advise someone who bought land from the people of estates and never paid back due to lack of money, never completed the payment due to lack of money? It is now 2 months past the agreed period, and according to what you have shared, it's really a bad debt. What advice do we give to to Beatrice. Harriet says, thank you, Ms. Frank, for a great presentation. Yes. Another thank you from Dennis. Another big thank you from Charles. A big thank you from Madame Kadama. Very enlightening session. Ronald, you have your hand up. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, thank you so much, moderator. I'm calling Sam Ronald. I hope you can hear me. I just have one simple question to ask you to guide me. I have a company, a financial institution which I'm running, but then I have been getting money from one of the money lender, and he has been giving money at 10%, which the guy has been discussing about. So I have multiple loans from that guy, and I think it's coming too much on me. I want you to guide me how I can really pay back this guy, because I'm learning, I'm getting from him, and I'm also learning at 20%. So I find that I'm earning late. I'm earning
10% per month, Ronald, or 10% per annum?
Per month, 10% per month. So I find that I'm earning less. I'm earning 10% on his money, and it's taking 10% because I'm learning at 20%. And you find that you have operation, you have this rent, and some other operation activities. So how would you guide me, Mr. Moderator?
Thank you, Ronald. The question is clear. Karen Frank, I hope you have picked that one up. There is another one from Isaac. Isaac says, thanks for the program. I own a small business and may not be able to acquire a loan. How do I raise capital without borrowing? One more. Hillary says, what are the alternatives to credit recovery extended to customers in a business in the form of providing services? Sorry, let me just see if I've captured that right. What are the alternatives to recover credit extended to customers in a business in the form of providing services, especially when there is no service contract? So how do we recover from customers, especially when you didn't write a contract? Kanfra, please go ahead and you can respond to those.
Thank you very much, Ronald. I hope I have captured them. The first one is from Sharon, building security for our own. Sharon, you need to have a wider discussion with me, but I share very, very briefly how I built security for the loan. Personally, you can think of your own method you want to use, but I really concentrated on real estate. That's one of my areas I like, but that's one area that I find easier to build security for your own. Why do I say this? I was a salary earner until 2008 when I transitioned the career, voluntarily left my employment and concentrated on my business. By that time, I had already started my business, which I lead now, Business Initiatives International, and it was about 3 years old because I established it in 2005. But when I was a salary earner, I would always eat my salary in advance in form of, those days we were very lucky, we had salary advances, interest-free salary advances. At some point they stopped, we had to go to commercial banks, but of course with guarantee from our employer. Now, my focus was whenever I get that advance, I put it into real estate. I buy either a plot of land or some piece of land or some developed property, or I develop a house. Now, the beauty with real estate, when you have a house, it is easy for a commercial bank to give you money. It is easy for somebody to give you money. Lending against real estate is very attractive. So that is where I built my security for loans, real estate. And the beauty with it, if you buy a house of 100 million, it means you can actually go to a bank and get 70% or 80% of it back. These days, some banks are even finance the whole thing. So you buy a house of 100 million, go to the bank, get 70% or get 80 million back into the business. It means effectively you have bought that house at 20 million. Now that means you can actually use that 80 million in your business. In commercial banks, they have, many of them have what they call equity release. You have a house of 100 million, that is your equity. Your capital is there, but you want to release it to your business. So you go to the bank, they give you 80% of that, they release that equity into your business and then you use it. So because real estate is where you can go and put money but get it back instantly, then it becomes attractive for you to build security for loan. That's how I did it. You can, of course, think of treasury bonds. That means, first of all, have money, but again, a treasury bond, you can borrow against it. Maybe I should mention this. Some people don't know. Treasury bond, fixed deposit. You can have a fixed deposit in a bank, but you can borrow against it. Because the fixed deposit is your money, but you don't want to touch it. You want it to keep there for you. You go to the bank and you borrow against it. And when you borrow against a fixed deposit, then the bank will give you that loan at a very low rate because it is a sure loan, you are going to pay it back. But as I mentioned, Sharon, make sure that when you are making that borrowing, you know that you are going to pay it back because you have the sources. So there are those options you can consider and build security for the loan. To Beatrice, run from estates and you have not completed and payments, and of course you are now having issues. My main advice is you negotiate. One, build the relationship, build and maintain the relationship, and two, you negotiate. Build and maintain a relationship with those people, and then negotiate with them. One of my family members got a very, very similar issue like you are talking about, and she handled it in a very interesting way. And she got back her run because I know most of these real estate agents. Sometimes the problem may not be on you, it can be on them. They can sell you air. I have examples. You buy a product, you pay, about at the completion time, they say it's no longer there. We used it. But build a relationship, negotiate, and I wouldn't advise you to go to court, but go there as a last resort. Even the Bible, I think in Matthew 5:25, they say don't go to court just because you can lose a lot of money there. You can. But if the worst comes the worst, then you can sue them. You can go to you can take it legal. But in the first, I don't know how far you've gone. 2 months is short. Good relationship. Go and tell them you're going to get this money because of this. At the very worst, they can give you some extra charges because of inflation, as I explained. But then I'm sure they should be able to accept and negotiate with you. Then Harriet, Dennis, and Kadama, thank you very much for the appreciation. I'm also happy to have had you in the audience, much as I may not have no need for. Then Ronald, this is a very interesting challenge of the financial institution where you've got 10% loan at 10% per month, and you have got multiple loans. You are charging 20% per month. One, I should first of all warn you, even the Bible talks about high interest. Avoid charging high interest. Because if you charge 20% per month to your client, where is he investing that money to get your 20% and also remain with something? You are again leading him into temptation. A business in Uganda will get 20% per month, and then you also get your own money. You are leading your client into temptation. Which temptation? Of defaulting on you, and when it defaults on you, also default on the one of 10%. Even 10% is very high. So, Ronald, the first question I'm asking you is: are you doing the right business? Lending at 20%. I had one of my children in Vudo, King's College, and in these schools they are very interesting. They lend money. For them, they were lending money at 10% per week. I think 10 or 15% per week. And when it default, they'd go to the bed and take all the mattresses and the bed sheets, and then they take out. That was their way for enforcement. And it took me time to run that. Then I said, you guys, how can you do such a thing? You take somebody's mattress. Yeah, he took money at 10% per week, and he knew that the visiting day was about to reach. The parents would bring him. They didn't bring so. Now, when you are lending at 20%, have empathy. Put this client in your shoes. Where does he get the money to pay you? Because you are tempting him to default. When he defaults, you also default. Because ideally, logically, if you are borrowing at 10% and you are lending at 20%, you shouldn't have any problem because you are making a lot of money. Yes, you borrow expensively, you lend expensively. You should not have any problem. but you are having problems because you did not do the feasibility study of your business. There is what they call KYCC, know your customer's customer. If you are lending it to so and so, if you are lending to Frank at 20%, do you know his customer? Where does Frank invest the money at 20% to get his 20% and also get another probably 20 or 10% for himself? You don't know my customer's customer. You are lending Frank at 20%. He takes the money home, they consume because he's in financial crisis. When he's consuming money at his home, in his home, how will he pay you? So I think that is the first challenge. But now, on multiple loans, with this guy, one, sit with him and negotiate. Tell him the challenge you have. I lend to people, this is their profile, they are not able to pay me. I have borrowed from you, and by the way, keep records. You have records. You've borrowed from him 10%, multiple loans. How many times have you borrowed from him? So much. How much money have you paid him? So much. Show him you guys have, over the period of time, I borrowed from you 40 million shillings. I mean, as an example, it could have been a billion, it could have been 10 million. I have borrowed from you 40 million shillings in a total principal. But I have paid back to you for these 2, 3, 4 years, a total of 120 million. So I have made you 3 times richer than I found you. Now I know I owe you another 100 million, but really I have made you 3 times richer. Don't you think on this 100 million I owe you, you can forgive me like 80 and I pay you 20? You can forgive me like 50 and I pay you 50? Now, if you negotiate from a point of knowledge, this guy should be able to say, I think this guy has helped me, has helped my business stand, and he's having challenges in his business. I think I should really reduce some. So when you negotiate, this guy can reduce this, your multiple loans, he can reduce, and then you start paying back. And by the way, businesses, they are born, they grow, they reach the apex, they decline. You could find that your business was born, it has grown, it is now at the apex, it is going to begin to decline and it can be at 0. So maybe you can think of closing that business and starting on another one. So I think this one is really something also that needs a bigger discussion, but those are the few highlights. Isaac, on raising capital, I think, I don't remember the exact question, but I think you were asking, how do you raise capital? Raising capital is simple. What is capital? There are many types of capital. There is financial capital, there is human capital, and the biggest thing is human capital. Human capital. Just attend such sessions, share with friends, interact with friends, people who know. Isaac, if you are an engineer or you are a doctor, you get a financial specialist. Have a cup of tea and share this. There are so many ways. Actually, research shows that we use only 5% of our brain. There are so many ways of raising capital, but you only need to be exposed. Get that exposure, create the exposure. Tell a guy you want to have a cup of tea with you, then you sit and talk. You can even create a relationship. Eventually, I'm sure you have role models, you have mentors. You sit with a mentor. If you get access to a role model, sit with him and say, I want to raise capital. How do I? Because the fact that you could become this kind of session means you are not an average person. You are certainly an above average person because you knew what you wanted. You can still see there are so many sources of raising capital. But before you meet such a guy, also think through yourself and see how can I raise capital. Go with like 4 sources and then let him dismiss all of them and give you one more. That is better than them, or let him pick one from the 4 you have gone with. Then lastly, this person, I have forgotten the name, who asked about no service contract. You didn't have a service contract. 1, the first lesson is when you are supplying goods, it's important to have a service contract. But 2, there are goods where the contract is difficult, like a retail trade, somebody does this, but create something, however rudimentary it might be. I'll give an example. I know there are some maids, some housemaids, house workers, house helps, who are very, very sharp. They are sharper than the bosses. You will employ him for 2 years, for 3 years. He earns the money all through. Then when he goes and sues you in LC in the police. This guy used me for 3 years and never paid me a coin. And you find you pay double. Some are sharp, they can do that. So my advice is, when you are using a house help, create a record. When he's getting a salary, let him sign for it. So if the guy goes and sues, say, no, but the guy has been signing here. So even with this surprise to your customers without a service contract, create some kind of record. When he takes a matchbox on credit, let him sign somewhere. I've taken a matchbox of so much at so much. I'll pay by this time. Because if I'm sure the people that are taking on credit are not many. So that in the future, when you are suing, you have that record. But now I'm talking about spirit milk. In this case, when there is no contract, you again negotiate with them. Sit and negotiate with them. And the first thing you try to do is to create that contract now. You call him, I'm assuming you are still on talking terms, say you took these goods, you are not able to pay, it's okay. I know you have issues, but at least let's now have a commitment. When are you paying me? So I'm paying you on this time. How much are you paying me? It is to be so much. Let him put it down in writing. Then he commits himself. And when a person knows he has written down something, it becomes more committing to him. But when he has written down nothing, then he can always jump away. And some of them are sharp. They know that did I write anywhere? I have a relative one time borrowed money from a relative. And when they went to the man, said, did I write anywhere? Did I say, did you see my name? Did you see my signature anywhere? So the first thing is create that contract now. Because he knows in his head, you also know, go and create it. So when you create it, in case he does not abide by what you have created, which refers to transactions of long ago, then you have something that you can take him on with regard. Ronald, I think I have tried to answer the questions that you raised. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thanks a lot. Create the contract right now. In case you haven't written one, KYCC, know your customer. Wow, a number of takeaways. Thanks a lot, Mr. Frank, for sharing your heart with us. Clearly, we have been enriched this morning, and the entrepreneurs were on the call. Number of thank yous in the WhatsApp box, rather in the chat box. Really, the messages have been practical. They have been simple. And for those of us who are about to get into debt, who are battling with debt, I think there are a number of things which we have taken away. Karim Frank, I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes to share your final remarks. Also share with us where we can find you. I know a number of people may want to have a direct conversation with you. I encourage you to go and buy those two books which Mr. Frank has shared, so that we can be able to learn more. We only just had just over 1 half hour to give his final remarks. Wrap up.
Thank you very much, Ronald. And my first final remark is thank God. Because I was worried that I would not be able to talk to you. I almost canceled it. Right now I'm in a place called Champangara in Chirugura, very, very deep. And I was really pessimistic about the network, but I'm happy that we went through, and at least I heard you, you heard me. So I thank God for this. And I couldn't travel last night. I'd have been here earlier and then tried to get the better network, but my wife had a presentation in St. Francis yesterday, so I had to wait for her, and then we traveled in the morning, so I thank God. Two, I thank God for the people that we are able to share with me. I saw we still have over 90. They reached about 106 when I was presenting, or slightly over close to 110. So I thank God for you. And where you can get me from, my office is well, I left the winter. Now it is in Old Kampala, below the police station, and just above Aga Khan High School. Aga Khan High School. In the middle, there is what they call Bombay Gardens. It's on Saro Road. There is a building called BIIL House. It's a tall building. If you are at Aga Khan, you actually see it. The signpost is there on top, BIIL House. We sit on 5th floor. You can very easily get me from there. And the number I shared with you is on WhatsApp. You can send me a WhatsApp. I can get in touch with you. And I am in office. My wife is my assistant. If I'm not there, you can find her there. But I'm always easily reachable. And I thank you for the sharing. I am happy that people are saying they appreciate it. We thank you and we wish you all the best of luck, Ronald and your group. Thank you very much. And thank you.